Hey, what is going on, psych students? It is me, Mr. Mori, and today we're going to just about finish the Batman notes. I'm going to save the very end for the very end, right? But I think after today we'll only have a little bit of I mean, we still will have the villains and everything, um, a couple of them, but for large and large, we're pretty close to being done. So we're going to finish Harley Quinn, and we're going to get rolling. We're going to do Superman today because nobody's voted yet by the time of me filming this video. And Superman was the one that had the second to most votes before we did the Riddler, which was the last time you guys voted. So that being said, today's video is actually going to be a 2-day assignment because the Superman episodes and or movie, depending on what option you pick, it's 3 episodes or a movie. That's a lot of time. So this is going to be a Friday and a Monday assignment, kind of like what we did with Scarecrow. So you could just watch the notes video, this notes video today, and kind of answer those questions on a separate document or whatever, and then watch the Superman movie or TV show episodes, whichever one you pick, on Monday and answer those questions, and then turn them, put them onto the discussion page. Excuse me. So that's how I would do it personally. And then on Tuesday we will be, we'll do, we'll do Catwoman and Penguin, and that'll probably be a single day or 2-day. I don't know, because that's also an option of a movie or 2 or 3 episodes as well. So, and then the Joker is going to be saved for last because he's the Joker. And after the Joker, we will finish the Batman notes for good. So we're probably going to have a few days left over. I mean, we're gonna have a few days to do the comic assignment and do a little. There's a little quiz I'm gonna have for this stuff. It's going to be like stuff you could reason your way through if you've been paying attention. I wouldn't be too stressed about it personally. It's only going to be like 10 questions or something. So if you didn't pick up on it, Harley Quinn is pretty easy to diagnose. In fact, I even very strongly hinted at it during the module 34 notes, although I could be thinking of last semester. I hinted at it, I think, a little too strong last semester. But anyway, she fits like to the T dependent personality disorder, an individual who defines his or her own self-concept in terms of some other person. Because she fears losing support or approval, the dependent person, Harley, does not disagree with someone, especially not the one she depends on the most, the Joker. She may make outlandish self-sacrifices and tolerate verbal, physical, or sexual abuse. Recognizing her own strength scares her, as though being able to live alone might increase the chances she'll wind up alone. Like, she fits this to the T. The author of the Batman psychology book is like, yep, she's pretty much like the poster child for dependent personality disorder. You typically find this disorder more commonly amongst females who do not have a good relationship with their father, because they tend to seek to replace that relationship with the lack of a relationship with another man, and they end up becoming very dependent on that man. As you know, Harley Quinn does have a lot of daddy issues as well. Harley Quinn recreates herself in the Joker's image. She fits all the characteristics of dependent personality disorder in relation to the Joker, abuse and all. For those people that think that Harley Quinn and the Joker have a cute relationship, no. You are incorrect. An abusive relationship is not cute. They removed a lot of the abusive elements from Suicide Squad because they were nervous of how it would affect the audience. But that is not a relationship that you should aspire to be like or admire in any way, shape, or form. So Joker at one point hurls Harley Quinn out of a window. He leaves her battered in an alley, and she tells herself, "It was my fault. I didn't get the joke." So rather than blame him and be honest about what this relationship is, she makes excuses and endures physical, emotional, and sexual abuse because she doesn't want to lose her man. She is dependent on being loved by this man, right? He does bring up, the author brings up, maybe she has shared psychotic disorder, shared psychosis. Harley and her dependency takes on some of the Joker's issues. However, there's not much evidence that she actually does take on any of his psychological issues. All of her motives seem to stem from her love of the Joker, which means she fits purely in dependent personality disorder. So why does she love him? Daddy issues. Her dad was a con artist. He lies to everyone, including family. Growing up with a parent who's a compulsive liar tends to make a child either gullible or cynical. One extreme or the other, ready to trust everything or nothing. Harley is the gullible of, out of the two options. Her intelligence makes it a challenge to stay so gullible, so she shuts off that parts of her, she kind of shuts off her smarts, if you will. She protects herself from reality, distorting using defense mechanisms, neurotic defense mechanism. Freud felt could turn psychotic if taken to an extreme. Denial, refusing to believe stressful truths. Suppression, refusing to think about stressful truths that have entered her memory. And rationalization, making of excuses like blaming Batman for the Joker's behavior. These let her hold on to hope. One thing that was really nice in the Suicide Squad movie is that, there's that sequence where she, Enchantress has Harley see her perfect dream world. And it is the Joker without his makeup. They have a kid and they're a happy family. That's what she wants, right? It's a sad story. It's a very good villain. I prefer her as a villain than an anti-hero. I think that it's kind of stupid when she's an anti-hero, but that's me. I think that we need good female villains. All right, so the end diagnosis is dependent personality disorder. Treatment is intensive psychotherapy followed by developing healthy, loving relationships. I think really more than just about any other villain, Harley Quinn is very aware that what she's doing is wrong. She's just very good at making excuses for her behavior out of her love for the Joker. One thing that the Harley Quinn does, she has her periods where she gets away from the Joker, but if it's ever a true Harley Quinn, she will always end up coming back to the Joker, like you see at the end of the episode in Mad Love. The Arkham games is honestly probably the purest, most loyal, most satisfying iteration of the character because she is still a villain. She's never not a villain in the Arkham games. She's not necessarily as evil as the other villains, and that's fine, but she's still a villain while still being Harley Quinn. She doesn't need to be an anti-hero or a straight-up hero to be a good character, and I think that the Arkham games proves that very, very well. So next we're going to look at Freud and Jung, two very famous psychologists. What would they have to say about Batman? The author spends a whole chapter on this, so we're going to briefly mention it. Why is Batman so strong-willed? Freud would credit Batman's toilet training, as he says. Freud theorized that people's experience a series of psychosexual stages of development that sculpt their psyches and go on to shape our lives, aka psychoanalytic theory. Your child has a dramatic impact on who you are as an adult. According to Freud, Batman would have developed a fixation and a stage of his life where a child resolves sexual and aggressive feelings toward parents by becoming more like the same gender parent, incorporating morals and values to develop the superego or moral core. AKA what that means is he would be opening himself up to pick up new skills and learn about the great big world right when a mugger's bullet shatters his world. This creates a fixation on revenge, mourning, and justice at the very formative age that would influence him for the rest of his life. And not to say he's actually a pretty realistic character in that regard, that, the age at which his parents are taken from him is pretty much at the optimal stage of which it would become a fixation. Again, his mission is essentially the equivalent of music to Mozart. It's just kind of the sole characteristic of who he is, right? It is his most defining characteristic. Same time, he also mentions, once again, it's also happening at an age where Batman has not reached puberty, where he starts to question his parents' moral codes. So his parents are left in this elevated status in his memory, and so he doesn't question their moral code, and so he adapts it. So that's why Batman has such a black and white moral code. That's why he's so firm in his belief and uncompromising, because he holds to his parents' untainted moral code. Because in his, he didn't really have his parents were dead by the time that he would have been questioning their moral code and authority. There are a few comic books that mess with that a little bit, but I really don't like them. There's one called Batman Damned, where they changed Thomas Wayne into kind of a horrible dad, and he's like having an affair on Martha, and don't read that comic book. I mean, it looks really cool, the art's really cool, but the story makes utterly no sense at all. I'm usually in complex plots, but I'm not going to lie to you. I've read that several times, and I'm like, I just don't understand what's going on here. It makes no sense. So Jung would say the shadow, the dark side, not evil, but out of the light, the characteristics you wish to conceal from both the world and yourself. In relation to shadow, Bruce Wayne confronts his own darkest nature early in life, chooses to work with it, and uses it to instill fear in others. His bright and dark sides work together in a fight. Not to say the author's making the point that Batman is not dominated by his darker side, contrary to popular belief. There is a lot of good in him, and he's not quite the brooding grump that sometimes people always think he is. The persona, the mask, essentially a collection of masks that the ego wears when interacting with the outer world. Again, you wear you're different than when you're with your grandmother than you are with your buddies in the locker room. The face you wear on Saturday night may not be the face you wear on a Sunday morning at church. The persona helps keep the shadow hidden. We don't want people to know our darker side. Right, so if the balance breaks down, a persona-dominated person will worry too much what people think. A shadow-dominated person might recognize no law beyond his own instant gratification. So Batman actually has a pretty good balance between those two, contrary to what you might think. Because he really, he does have disregard for the law, but he does have a code, and he really doesn't break that code, except in some iterations. Right? And he really doesn't care what other people think at all, to be honest. I don't know why my voice just cracked there, but we're going to ignore it. The Joker hates the nice, I love this. The Joker hates the nice, bright masks people wear. He strives to smash masks, trying to unleash people's shadow selves, in terms of Jung's psychology, shadow selves, on the assumptions that they are monsters at heart. The Joker does not want Batman to have an alter ego. He threatens the lives of those who might expose the hero's identity. He does not want to see Batman in the daylight. He refuses to recognize any brighter facets of Batman's personality. So that to say, the Joker, kind of a hint to his psychology before we get to him, the Joker doesn't want to know, even in The Dark Knight, once Joker is introduced to Batman, he switches from wanting to know who Batman is to definitely not wanting to know, because it's more fun not knowing. And he doesn't want there to be more to Batman. The Joker is all about, 100%, all of Joker's plots are always about proving that the world is just as messed up as he is, that people, if they have a bad enough day, can turn out just like him. He's trying to justify his actions by showing, well, I had a really bad day, and that's why I am like this. And this, by the way, could happen to anybody. If they had the day that I had, they would have turned out the same way as me. So he doesn't like masks. He wants people to be their true selves. Like, it annoys the Joker when people smile and say, "Hey, how you doing? Good. How are you? Good." That would annoy him because he knows it's a lie. The person's not doing it. They just say good. It's the expectation that you just say, "Oh, I'm good." Because if you ever were actually to say, "Oh, I'm not good. I'm actually struggling," people look at you like, "Why are they talking to me? I just said, how are you doing?" In America, it's like the person doesn't genuinely want to know how you're doing. They don't care. The Joker's like, let's just be honest about it. Let's not wear these stupid masks. Like, he wants people to admit that they are evil at heart and that they should give up their masks of trying to pretend to be a good person. That is pretty much the heart of Joker's character. He's trying to prove that other people are just as messed up as him. He's just honest about how messed up he is. So he doesn't want there to be anything under Batman's mask. He doesn't want to know who's under the mask because he wants there to only be Batman. He doesn't want there to be a brighter side. He almost loves Batman because Batman embraces his darker side, and the Joker likes that. Of course, the Joker also wants to prove that Batman can go, of course, a step darker. And he has a lot, it's a lot more than just that. But that's a big part of it. In The Dark Knight, in the opening scene, it's this bank heist, right? And, Joker takes off his clown mask and he has just more clown mask, right? So that is symbolic, saying that behind the Joker is just more Joker. There's nothing else. In that movie, we never learn what his name is, where he comes from, no history. And even if he told us his history, we probably wouldn't trust him. In the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix, if you've seen it, you know that the movie does something very clever. And I love that movie because it captures all of the things that are important about the Joker while being unique. And the things that make the Joker unique is that you can't have a backstory. And that movie does a good job of making you question whether or not the whole movie is, like, what is real and what isn't. Because, he hallucinates stuff. And you kind of have to have that, wanting to prove that everybody is just as bad as me. And that movie gets both of those pretty on point. But, that to say, in The Dark Knight, when he takes off the clown mask in the beginning, it's just more Joker. That to say, excuse me. That was gross. Anyway, it's just to say there's only more Joker, right? So Batman, like most heroes, has a balance between persona and shadow. So quickly, we'll go through some of the Robins here. Why kids? What's the psychology behind having Robin? Well, if you look at it, all of the Robins look like Bruce Wayne. They're all orphaned. And I think that psychologically, Bruce Wayne, he usually picks them up at about the same age that he lost his parents. So I think psychologically, Batman picks up these orphan boys because he wants to help them to not become and have to go through what he went through and become what he became. You look at Dick Grayson, who becomes Nightwing. He is a better version of Batman in that he's not as damaged. And that is because of how Batman helps him avenge his parents' murder. If you don't know, Dick Grayson is in a circus act, the Flying Graysons, and his parents are killed. The rope is cut and they fall to their deaths. And Bruce Wayne is in the audience. He adopts Dick Grayson. And slowly it's revealed, hey, I'm Batman. You can be my sidekick. I want to help you avenge your parents. I want to help you get justice. I want to help find your parents' murders. And he does. And that's significant because Batman, if we're talking about the canon, like the true Batman, sometimes they change it. He never finds the guy that kills his parents, or he never gets justice, I should say. Yeah, Joe Chill never goes to prison, except in some iterations, like Batman Begins. It's a little different. But even in Batman Begins, he never gets his vengeance. He never gets to avenge his parents. It gets taken from him. He didn't want that to happen for Dick Grayson. So he finds justice for Dick Grayson's parents' murder. And, so Dick grows up without that chip on his shoulder. And so I think that a lot of the Robin scenario is him trying to basically fulfill his mission in the purest sense, in that he doesn't want what happened to him to happen to somebody else. So I think that it's kind of a healing thing for Batman, for Bruce Wayne, the Robin scenario. So you have Dick Grayson, who's the first Robin, and he becomes the character Nightwing. Then you have Jason Todd, but people really didn't like him because everybody was attached to Dick Grayson. But, people get older. Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing, and so they, needed a new Robin. So they go with Jason Todd. Well, people really didn't like him. He was kind of punky, and he's kind of, Batman finds him trying to steal the tires off of the Batmobile. And it actually gets kind of controversial. People didn't like him so much that DC Comics had a vote on whether or not to kill off Jason Todd, and the audience, the comic book readers, voted to kill him off. And so there's a comic book, A Death in the Family, where the Joker beats Jason Todd to death with a crowbar and then blows him up and kills Robin. And that is canon. Jason Todd does come back to life by being resurrected in the Lazarus Pit, which, if you know a lot about Batman, there's a character, Ra's al Ghul, who is pretty much immortal. Anytime he starts to die, they put him in the Lazarus Pit. It's this magical pool of acid that can raise the dead. But when you are raised from the dead in the Lazarus Pit, you are brought back as a little unhinged. So Jason Todd comes back to life, and he is angry at Batman for not killing the Joker in retaliation for killing him. So he kind of takes it upon himself to punish Batman. If you want to know more about that really good animated movie, Batman Under the Red Hood, or you could play Arkham Knight. That's a really good storyline for the Red Hood as well. Next, you have Tim Drake. He becomes Red Robin, which you see up here. There's not a whole lot of complexity to him. He's just kind of like a standard Robin. He's also an orphaned boy. Then you have Damian Wayne, who is Batman's bastard child with Talia al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul's daughter. So Damian Wayne is raised by assassins in the League of Assassins, and then he goes on to live with his dad, Bruce. And so there's kind of that dynamic that Damian's kind of a little psychotic. He's kind of an assassin, and he's a little unhinged, and so Batman kind of has to rope him in and teach him, like, no, we don't kill, we're not assassins, all of that. We also have Batgirl, who is Barbara Gordon, obviously Commissioner Gordon's daughter. She usually, about a few years into the career, there's a comic book called The Killing Joke, which is the best-selling Batman comic book, I think, of all time. It's very popular. If you like Alan Moore, if you like Watchmen, he also wrote The Killing Joke, which is essentially where the Joker, to prove that anybody can become as bad as him, he picks Commissioner Gordon as his victim. So in order to break Commissioner Gordon, the Joker finds Barbara Gordon's apartment, knocks on the door, she answers the door, he shoots her through the stomach, through the spine, paralyzing her, and then takes off her clothes and rapes her while taking photographs, and then leaves her there to be found by the police. And then he kidnaps Commissioner Gordon, strips him naked, and parades him through a carnival ride while showing him the pictures of him raping Barbara Gordon. That's the Joker in the comic books. I know that the Joker movie got everybody like, whoa, the Joker. But trust me, the Joker in the comic books is way darker. Like in the Joker movie, when he kills whenever he kills, a certain character on a certain TV show. I mean, if you haven't seen the movie by now, that's your problem. Spoiler alert. In the comic book version, he breaks a glass bottle, slits the TV host's neck, and then kisses a lady, which he does in the movie, but in the comic book, his lips is laced with poison, so she dies of poison. And then he goes around on a flying toy baby and poisons the entire audience, killing them with his laughing toxin, which basically makes you laugh so hard that you die. So the Joker in the comic books is a bit more intense, taking pictures of Barbara Gordon after you've paralyzed her and are in the process of raping her, and then showing her naked dad while parading him through a circus act while singing to him and showing him pictures of what he did to your daughter. It's pretty messed up. And then we have Huntress, who I'm not going to say too much about. This is Red Hood right here. This is Jason Todd, when he's resurrected. This is Nightwing. Nightwing is an interesting because he's kind of like the only male character that is like super sexualized in comic books. You usually see female characters with the butt shots, but Dick Grayson always has the butt shots. He's kind of like considered like the sexy male superhero. This is Red Hood, Tim Drake, whenever he's done being Robin. So yeah. Then you have Batgirl, Huntress. Huntress is really, I would not consider Huntress from Birds of Prey too accurate to the comic book. She's a lot cooler in the comic book. But, it gets a general essence right. She's basically a character that wants revenge for, it depends on what comic book you're reading, but it's usually her parents who are murdered by some kind of a mob figure. She wants vengeance. She's not really on Team Batman, but she is a Gotham City vigilante. And there's Batwoman, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a dumber character, in my opinion. I just hate it when you have like a really popular male superhero and you're like, hey, what would be cool? Let's make the female version of it. Like, no. Make a cool, awesome, unique female character. I digress. So here we have the probably one of the best Batman comic books / Justice League comic books ever written. Basically, if you've ever seen like Stranger Things, like there's the upside down world. Well, it's basically that concept that, DC has the infinite Earths scenario. Well, what if there were, for every alternate universe that has a dark ending, for every decision you make, there's the good, the angel on your shoulder, and there's the demon on your shoulder. Well, what if there was an underneath universe, multiverse, where all of your bad decisions came true, right? And so these are all of the evil Batmen from said worlds. Like this is a Batman from a world where he ends up killing Wonder Woman and becomes like the god of war. He kills Ares and becomes the god of war. This is an alternate world where Bruce Wayne is a woman and she kills Aquaman and becomes essentially Batman Aquaman. This guy's really interesting. So if you know, I've described what a Green Lantern is a little bit, but basically, whenever a Green Lantern dies, the Ring finds a new person to be the Green Lantern. There are actually thousands of Green Lanterns. Each one is assigned to different planets. Anyway, in this world, a Green Lantern Ring finds Bruce Wayne right after his parents were murdered, like seconds afterwards. And a Green Lantern Ring actually prohibits you from killing. Like, you can't kill with a Green Lantern Ring. But Bruce Wayne's sheer willpower in the moment of his parents' murder is so strong that it breaks the ring and makes it into something where he can kill, and he kills Joe Chill, his parents' murderers, right then and there with the Green Lantern Ring. So he's able to use the ring to make some pretty creepy energy machinations. This is a really interesting. Batman hooks the Flash up to the Batmobile and uses the Flash's speed, and the process actually melts them together. So Bruce Wayne and the Flash are in one body. And then this is like the Superman Batman. He gets fused with Doomsday, and this is Cyborg. But I think that the Green Lantern one's probably the coolest iteration. Anyway, that's a really cool. It's called DT Metal, and it really is so awesome. I'll show you that whenever I show you my comic books for the comic book day. So father figures. Why do we fall, Master Bruce? So growing up without parents, Bruce doesn't get to learn from their example of how couples interact, work together, and resolve conflicts. As Bruce grows, his understanding of his parents does not progress naturally by observing, appraising, and reassessing them with a maturing point of view. And I've alluded to this several times, and this leads to him having a romanticized image of his parents. But as well, whether you realize it or not, when you are growing up, you are watching your parents. You are watching the parent that is your same sex, and you're observing what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman. Subconsciously, it is influencing you. And no more will you realize the truth of what I'm saying than whenever you get married. When you get married and you're living with somebody else, and suddenly you start to realize how your parents influenced you, because the person you're marrying grew up in a different household, so they interpret things in a different way than you. So you just kind of notice it, and it's kind of pointed out and brought to your attention. But it really is true. Whenever I got married, I expected, it to be pretty intense. My parents, when they would fight, it was pretty intense. Things would be thrown, and there's a lot of yelling. That's not the case, in my marriage. So, and Sarah's marriage, her parents kind of just, not Sarah's marriage, and Sarah's parents, they kind of just, instead of like my parents throwing things and screaming, they kind of just passive-aggressively hate each other for several weeks at a time and slowly build up resentment towards one another. I don't know which one of those I hate more, but I don't think that we really have either of those. Maybe a little bit. I don't know. Who knows? My kids will tell me, I'm sure. But as Bruce grows, his understanding of his parents does not progress naturally, again, because they died prematurely. He doesn't get to critique like, I love my dad. I agree with a lot of things that he does. But in your teenage years, you start to question maybe some, like, why do they think that way? Bruce doesn't have that, right? So again, he has his parents in this idealistic view, which I'm sure makes Alfred's job of raising him even harder, because Alfred won't be able to live up to that. So how did not having a father affect Batman? That's kind of what I've just been explaining here. Again, I pretty much have all the excerpts, what they say in general, pretty well memorized. So yeah. So we have James Gordon, who is Commissioner Gordon, and he helps Batman, Bruce Wayne, from crossing the line. There are times, like when Jason Todd is killed, that Batman is certainly tempted to kill, and James Gordon is always the one to bring him back from the brink, because Batman does toe that line pretty closely sometimes. Lucius Fox, who is kind of like the Wayne Enterprises connection to Bruce and Batman. He's the guy that gives Batman all his gadgets. He's played by Morgan Freeman in the Batman Dark Knight trilogy. We have Alfred, who is the adoptive father. The father, whether the hero or villain himself, provides the hero with reference for how to become a man. The mother does not, and Bruce Wayne is all man. That to say, to make sense of that, because it's a little confusing. Whether you want to admit it or not, ultimately the facts do not care about your feelings. You do base your ideals of what it means to be a man or a woman based off of your parents. It just is the way that it is. And you can resist that all you want, but whether you embrace their way of doing it or you go against it, it is because of them and your reaction to their style that you have those feelings, okay? So even if you go against the way that your dad raised you, it's still because of him that you're deciding to not be like him, right? So the father, if you're a son, if you're a male, the father has a dramatic impact on who you are. I cannot emphasize that enough. The statistics on crime rate, on men that grow up without a father, it is astronomically higher, dramatically higher, like to the point where it is crazy. Having a male presence in the household for a son is vital if you want to set up your kid to not have to overcome a ton of obstacles. That being said, if you grow up in a family without your dad, that doesn't mean that you're going to become a criminal. But statistically, the numbers don't lie. Statistically speaking, life might be a little bit harder for you. You might have a little bit of a harder time in life because you didn't have a good father figure. I should clarify, a good father figure. It's not enough for the dad just to be there. They need to be a good father figure, right? Now, what you identify as a good father figure and what is a good father figure is probably a little bit different. In my opinion, and I think a lot of psychologists and mental health professionals would agree, a good parent is not your friend until maybe you're in adulthood. A good parent is going to value discipline and preparing you for the world, and that includes tough love. A parent that cannot do tough love is not a good parent, in my opinion. And I think that the evidence is in the pudding in a lot of cases. Now, you don't want to be too intense because I think the evidence is in the pudding for that as well. Nor should we expect parents to be perfect. But that to say, for the female, it's very important that the mom be present, and also the father as well, and a reverse as well. It's very important for a son to have that mother presence, that nurturing presence, and it is also very important that a daughter have a father, a good father, to kind of base and have standards for the type of man that they're going to look for, right? And again, I'm using generally speaking. I know that there are exceptions to things, but generally speaking, this is the case. Generally speaking, the mother is the nurturer and the father is the, not. And that is very much so the case in the family that I grew up. But, case in point, there are exceptions. In my wife's house, I think that it's kind of the opposite. I think that the dad is more of the nurturer and the mother more of the disciplinarian. But that's just an outsider's perspective. But in my growing up, my dad was definitely the disciplinarian and my mother definitely the nurturer. And it'll probably be the same way. In fact, I know it'll be the same way for my kids. So interactions show mutual support. Alfred freely chastises Bruce and gives him unsolicited advice. Few servants would dare utter, expressing disagreement and worry through gentle rebukes and soft sarcasm, and Bruce doesn't view him as hired help. Gotham does an excellent job of showing this. So does really any iteration of Alfred does a good job of this. Alfred's kind of one of those consistent things that's just always good. Although this is my favorite version of Alfred, is from the Dark Knight trilogy. I mean, Alfred does have a pretty relaxed parenting style. I mean, obviously, because Bruce becomes Batman. In Batman's own words, and then when they were under the ground, his parents, he became my guardian and friend, nagging constantly, sometimes caustically, never letting me neglect my schoolwork, always keeping my obsessions in check. With him, I remained driven but disciplined, anchored to vital reality through his sternness and arch humor, my soul tempered by his firm kindness and steadfast humanity. So that is the last slide of the Batman notes, except for the end, which I'm going to save for the very end, like once we're done with the Joker and all of that. So let's not spoil it. Let's go to Superman. Superman. Introduce him. I hope I covered the father figure stuff. We'll go over some like gender, sex, psychology with Catwoman as well, because Catwoman, we look at love and what attraction, the psychology of attraction, all that is. So Superman. Otherwise, his Earth name is Clark Kent. His Kryptonian name is Kal-El. He's not a Batman villain, but the author goes into detail on what makes a hero, and so I thought that including Superman would make an interesting case study. As well as there are actually a lot of iterations where Batman and Superman fight. Usually when they first meet, they're not really fans of each other. So he's the son of Krypton, a planet that was destroyed because the Kryptonians harvested energy from its core and made it unstable. In some iterations, it's a villain Brainiac that kind of makes it unstable. Superman is its only survivor thanks to the efforts of his parents to save him. They kind of send him on a rocket to Earth as their world is exploding to kind of preserve the Kryptonian, race. Once on Earth, he is taken in by his adoptive parents, Jonathan and Martha Kent, in Kansas. He is raised under a traditional Christian household in Kansas and is the definition of a Boy Scout. Superman is truly a Boy Scout. He is that living embodiment of Christian value. Now, the thing about comic book characters is they change throughout time. So if you're reading modern day comic books, he's not really the embodiment of Christian morality because, very often comic book writers are atheist liberals. And so a conservative Christian from Kansas doesn't really fit their narrative. So they don't really typically write Superman the way that he traditionally is written. But at his very core, Clark Kent is the textbook Kansas Protestant Christian conservative boy. He has those very traditional Christo-Judeo values, right? But again, in modern day comics, for example, he does not wait to get married to have sex with Lois Lane, things like that. And I believe just like last year, they said in a comic book that he is not a Christian, that he's not sure about it. And I get that from the comic book company's perspective because in 2020 America, we're not as Christian as we used to be. And they want to reach a wide audience. With a character like Superman and Batman, you want to not offend certain groups because they're really popular heroes and you want to try to remain as neutral as possible. So by having Superman say, well, I'm not really sure, that kind of keeps things open. Of course, in the DC universe, you also have the Greek gods. You have Ares and Zeus and all of them. You have Poseidon. You also have the Christian God is a real entity in the DC universe. Judas is a comic book character in the DC comics. He's called the, what's his name? The Phantom Stranger. And the 17 pieces of silver that he got for betraying Jesus he wears around his neck. And he has to spend eternity basically redeeming himself before he can get to heaven. Right? So, I don't know. It's interesting. They do a good job of, I think, being inclusive of a lot of different religions and things. I mean, Batman, to me, people who think Batman as a Christian, I'm like, you're not really paying attention. He's a millionaire playboy. There's really nothing Christian about him. So, but with Superman, I think that the purest form of him is that stereotypical conservative Kansas boy. But let me make sure that I'm not getting ahead of myself. Okay. I mean, you can go ahead and look at that slide if you wanted to pause it, but it's not going to spoil anything. But this is what he looks like. So you actually have options for the Superman observation. Let me pull up the sheet on him. So right here you have the sheet, right? And I don't think I put this in the Batman unit folder, so I'm going to email this out to you guys. But you're basically going to be comparing their motives. Batman's motives versus Superman's motives. Their motivations for being a hero, their differences, what makes Batman different, what makes Superman different, what is similar, okay? I guess you don't really need the different boxes for that. And then what makes each of them a hero, okay? So we're really looking at the psychology of what a hero is and the psychology of each character and what makes them different. Because they're both heroes, but they're very different. Okay, so that's kind of the focus of this. And so you have an option. You can go two routes. You can either watch the 3 Superman the Animated Series episodes that I link in Canvas, all right, and you can answer that set of questions. Or you can watch Batman versus Superman, the movie, preferably the Ultimate Edition because it fills in a lot of the plot holes. Warner Brothers had cut a lot of the movie so that it would be shorter, but in doing so they created certain plot holes, so the Ultimate Edition is really the only way to watch it. It's like 3 hours, but it is honestly in my top 5 favorite movies. Both the cartoon episodes, which would equal to be about probably an hour of cartoons, or watching a full-length movie. I don't believe the movie's on any streaming services, so I do expect that most of you will probably do the cartoon route. But the movie is really good, and tomorrow or Monday or whenever, I believe it would be Monday, no, Tuesday, because you're going to have Monday to watch it. I will go and explain why I think it's a good movie, because a lot of people hate that movie. But I honestly think it's a masterpiece. I think people that don't get it don't understand the characters and understand what the director is trying to do. So I will make my defense for that movie whether you watch it or not. So you can pick between the two. So yeah, you can either rent the movie or you can watch the cartoons. Either way, you fill out this sheet and there will be discussion questions for either path that you choose. You have today and Monday to do this assignment, and that is that. I don't think there is a case file on Superman because I didn't really see the point. But have yourself a wonderful day. Peace out and take care of yourselves. Have a good weekend.